There is a superpower that nobody talks about. It cannot be bought. It cannot be taught in a classroom. It cannot be downloaded or practiced in 30 days. It is built, slowly, through one of the hardest things a human being can do. Choosing not to react. Not because you don't feel, not because you don't care, not because you are weak, but because you understand something most people never learn. The space between what happens and what you do next is where your entire life is decided. This is the story of Leo, and the moment he discovered that space. Leo was 34 years old, and he was fast, not physically, though he was that too, but mentally. His mind moved quickly. His responses came immediately. His reactions were instant, sharp, precise, complete, before most people had finished forming their first thought. People called it quick-wittedness, they called it intelligence, they called it confidence, and it was all of those things. But it was also a problem. Because Leo's speed, the same speed that made him impressive in good moments, made him dangerous in difficult ones. When someone challenged him, he responded before he thought. When someone criticized him, he defended before he listened. When someone provoked him, he reacted before he understood what was actually happening. His mouth moved at the speed of his feelings. And feelings, as Leo was slowly learning, are not always right. He had lost things because of this. A job opportunity. Because he had responded to a difficult interview question with something clever that was also slightly arrogant. The interviewer had smiled thinly. He didn't get the call. A friendship. Because during an argument he had said something so fast, so precisely aimed, so immediately regretted, that the friendship never fully recovered. Not because the friend couldn't forgive, but because Leo couldn't forgive himself, and the guilt had built a wall between them that neither knew how to remove. His older colleague, Mr. Park, a man of 61 who had navigated 30 years of corporate politics with remarkable grace, watched Leo with quiet interest. One afternoon he said, "Leo, can I ask you something?" "Of course," Leo said. When someone says something that bothers you, how long does it take you to respond? Leo thought. "Immediately," he said. "I don't really think about it. The response is just there." Mr. Park nodded. "And how often," he said slowly, "does that immediate response serve you well?" Leo opened his mouth, closed it. Because the honest answer, the answer he had never said out loud, was, "Not as often as I think." The test came 3 weeks later. Leo was in a team meeting. A new project was being discussed, one that Leo had been developing for 2 months. His ideas, his research, his framework. And then a colleague, a man named Garrett, began presenting what sounded remarkably like Leo's approach. Not identical, but close enough. Close enough that Leo felt the familiar heat rise in his chest. He had shared early ideas with Garrett in a casual conversation 6 weeks ago. And now, here was Garrett, presenting those ideas as if they had arrived fully formed from his own mind. Leo felt everything at once. The anger, the injustice, the urge to speak immediately, to correct the record, to make it clear, right now, in front of everyone, that these ideas had an origin. And that origin was him. The words were already forming, fast, precise, ready. And then, something happened that had never happened before. He remembered Mr. Park's question. How often does that immediate response serve you well? And in the space of one breath, one single breath, he stopped. Not permanently, not passively. He just paused. And in that pause, he saw something he would have missed if he had spoken immediately. He saw the room. He saw his manager, listening carefully, nodding at Garrett's presentation. He saw 2 colleagues who knew the history, who had been in earlier conversations, glancing at Leo with expressions that said, "We know." He saw Garrett, nervous, slightly overreaching, a man who was not malicious, but was ambitious in ways that sometimes outpaced his integrity. And he saw, most importantly, what would happen if he spoke right now. He would look reactive. He would look threatened. He would look like someone who cared more about credit than about the project. And Garrett, calm, still presenting, would look like the reasonable one. Leo said nothing. He let Garrett finish. He asked 2 questions, technical questions that only someone who had developed the framework deeply could ask. Questions that demonstrated without stating that he knew this material at a level Garrett did not. The room noticed. His manager noticed. After the meeting, his manager stopped him in the hallway. "Leo, how familiar are you with the framework Garrett presented?" "Very," Leo said simply. "I'd be happy to walk you through the full development at your convenience." His manager looked at him for a long moment. "Let's do that tomorrow," he said. That evening, Leo sat with what had happened. Not the outcome, though the outcome was good, but the moment. The pause. That single breath between the provocation and the response. He had never experienced it before, not consciously, and in that breath, he had seen more clearly than he had ever seen in the heat of immediate reaction. He thought about chess. A chess player who moves immediately, who responds to every threat the moment it appears, is a predictable player. Their opponent learns the pattern, exploits it, uses their speed against them. But a chess player who pauses, who sees the whole board, who asks not just what is happening now, but what is actually happening here? That player is dangerous, not because they are faster, because they are deeper. Leo had been playing chess at the speed of checkers his entire life, reacting to each piece as it moved, without ever seeing the full board. He thought about water again. Still, water reflects clearly. Disturbed water, choppy, reactive, moving, reflects nothing accurately. Every time Leo reacted immediately, every time he responded, from the first wave of feeling he was disturbed water. Reflecting distortion, showing the world not what was true, but what was felt in that specific, temporary, unreliable moment. The pause, that single breath, was the difference between disturbed water and still water, between reaction and response. Between the person he had always been and the person he was beginning to understand he could become. He called Mr. Park that evening. "Something happened today," he said. "Tell me," Mr. Park said. Leo told him everything. When he finished, Mr. Park was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Leo, do you know what you discovered today?" The pause, Leo said. "Yes, but more than that. You discovered that you have a choice. Most people never discover that. They believe their reactions are automatic, inevitable, just who they are. But you found the space between stimulus and response. That space, however small, is where freedom lives. And once you find it, you can never unfind it." Leo practiced the pause. Not in dramatic moments first, in small ones. When someone cut him off in traffic, one breath before the horn. When a colleague said something mildly irritating, one breath before the sharp reply. When his phone showed a message that made his stomach tighten, one breath before he opened it. One breath, every time. Not to suppress the feeling, not to pretend it wasn't there, but to create, deliberately, the space between what happened and what he chose to do next. The results were quiet, but they accumulated. He stopped saying things he immediately regretted. He stopped having conversations that escalated beyond what the original issue deserved. He stopped giving people who wanted a reaction, the satisfaction of getting one, and something unexpected happened. People began to describe him differently. Not as quick, not as sharp, as steady, as someone you could bring a difficult problem to, and trust that the response would be considered not just fast, as someone whose words, when they came, carried weight, because they were chosen, not just released. Garrett, of all people, said something to him 3 months later. "Leo, I owe you an apology. The framework I presented, I took more from our conversation than I should have. I've been thinking about it, and I wanted to say I'm sorry." Leo looked at him. The old Leo would have had a response ready. Something that accepted the apology while making sure Garrett understood exactly how wrong he had been. The new Leo said, "I appreciate that. Thank you for saying it." And meant it. Completely. Without the footnote. Without the score being settled. Just acceptance and release. Garrett looked almost surprised. As if he had expected something more. As if the absence of retaliation was itself a kind of power. The twist in Leo's story is not that he became passive. He became the opposite of passive. He became intentional. Every word chosen. Every response considered. Every action the result of a decision, not a reflex. And intentional people, people who choose their responses rather than releasing them, are the most powerful people in any room. Not because they feel less, but because they decide more. So here is what I want you to understand about the art of not reacting. It is not about becoming cold. It is not about becoming distant. It is not about suppressing what you feel. It is about finding and protecting and expanding the space. The space between what happens to you and what you choose to do next. That space is where you live. That space is where your character is built. That space is where the difference is made between the life that happens to you and the life you actually create. Here is how to find it. 1. Breathe first. 1 breath. Before every response that matters. Not to delay, to arrive. To be present in the moment of decision rather than the moment of reaction. 2. Ask what is actually happening. Not what it feels like is happening. Not what your first instinct says is happening. What is actually happening? Who are the people involved? What do they actually want? What do you actually want? What response serves the outcome you actually care about? 3. Choose your response from your values, not your feelings. Feelings are real. Feelings are important. Feelings are information. But feelings are not your identity. Your values are your identity. And your values, when you give them the space to speak, will always tell you something wiser than your first reaction. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your power, is your freedom, is your choice. Most people never find that space. They live their entire lives believing their reactions are inevitable, that they have no choice, that this is simply who they are. But you, having heard this story, having found the space, you know differently. The space is there. It has always been there. 1 breath wide, and infinite in possibility. Find the space, live in the space, and watch as the life you build from that space becomes something your reactions alone could never have created. If this story shifted something in how you see yourself, share it with someone who is exhausted from their own reactions. Someone who keeps saying things they don't mean, doing things they regret, living at the speed of their feelings, who just needs to hear, there is a space. Find it. Everything changes there. This video is for them. This video is for you. Thank you for watching.